Good afternoon. Welcome to USGI seminars on the issues of social innovation, US-Japan comparison studies in this new emerging new trend in innovations. I'm Kazuichi Uchida, president of this USGI, and also vice president of Massachusetts University in Tokyo. USGI is a non-profit research institute in Washington, D.C., established in April 2009 by leading Japanese universities, now managed by 8 universities, namely Dosha, Keio, Kyoto, Kyushu, Tsukuba, University of Tokyo, Ritsumeikan, and Waseda universities, and financially supported by business societies of both US and Japan. The mission of USJI is to promote policy-related research and to nurture young researchers and to formulate a community of researchers and policymakers. With regard to research activities, USJI focuses on 3 main topics, such as environment and energy, securities, and regional collaboration. USJI organizes a few research groups consist of researchers from both US and Japan, and they publish their research results and hold seminars. USGI usually holds week-long seminars twice a year in March and September here in Washington, D.C., and occasional seminars once or twice a month, and sometimes holds symposiums in Japan. For example, last December, USGI held a symposium titled The First Year of Abe Administrations and Direction for the Future, Diplomacy and Security Strategies. Keynote speakers were former US Ambassador to Japan, Michael Amakost, and Japanese Defense Minister, Mr. Itsunori Onodera. Also, from last year, USJI started Japan 101 seminar series with US Asia Institute, US Japan Council, and National Bureau on Asian Study, Asian Research, to discuss fundamental socio-economic and political issues of current Japan in order to provide useful information to people in Capitol Hill. With regard to the details of our activities, please check our website. This week, we hold 10 different events covering a wide range of topics. Among them, Event 10, Science, Japan Dynamics, and Implication for the US-Japan Alliance is co-hosted by National Bureau of Asian Studies. Event 9, Building the Tomodachi Generation, is co-hosted by US-Japan Council and the Washington Center. USJI is very pleased to collaborate with these organizations. And this afternoon's event is number 3, Social Innovations. And I think this is quite new and detailed topic for the relation between the United States and Japan. And we are very fortunate to have a group of distinguished speakers. And I'm sure today's discussion will be very stimulating and will produce fruitful and productive results. Before introducing Professor Mitsumori, I would like to ask to receive your permission of videotaping these seminars and open to public through internet. Thank you very much. Professor Mitsumori.
So good afternoon. Thank you for coming to our session. So title of our session is Social Innovation, Use Japan Comparison Studies in Emerging Trend of Innovation. So we have 3 speakers for this session. And first, the Professor Gabriel Broder of New York University. So Professor Broder is Executive Director of New York University's renowned programs in social entrepreneurship. And Mr. Greg Van Kirk. Mr. Van Kirk is Ashoka Emerson Fellow and Ashoka Globalizer. And myself, my name is Yaigo Mitsumori. I'm Associate Professor at Tsukuba University. And I'm teaching the innovation at the MBA IB course. So first, for structure of this session, first I will give about say 20 minutes presentation, and followed by Professor Brodberg, and he will give a talk from the academic point of view, and then Mr. Van Clark will give his talk from practitioner's point of view. Okay? First part of my presentation includes kind of introduction for social innovation, so I will start my presentation. So I've been doing my research on social innovation, and the presentation today's presentation is based on my research. So basically, I have two objectives under mine. So at finding out success factors of social innovation in states in Japan, and the second one is the third paragraph, and trying to work out measures to promote social innovation in Japan. So background. So I'm teaching innovation, so it's quite difficult. So, it is that 1980s is a turning point for social innovation, and as you remember, the States and Europe, especially in UK, the States and Europe, especially Britain, have small government under the President Reagan and the Prime Minister Thatcher. Okay, you remember very well, I think. And under the small government, the budget for social activities are cut off, and it actually activated social innovation. Okay. But Japan has the slightly different story. I'm going to explain later, but we have noticed so-called the bubble economy was passed down in 1980, and since then we have so-called the lost decades, about say 20 years, with no return. And during the period, we have big natural disasters like the Hanshin big earthquake and Hanshin area, and also the 3/11, something like that. So those incidents changed people's value recognition, and Japanese people tend to put more emphasis on social value. First, we have to define terminology. This happened this time. First, we have to define innovation, and when we talk about innovation, we have to refer to Schumpeter. The Schumpeter is recognized as the first of innovation, and he distinguished five the different types of innovation, as you know. The first one is new products, second one is new method of production, the third one is new sources of supply, the first one is exploitation of new markets, and fifth one is new ways to organize business. In Japan, two ministries are engaged in innovation, mixed and the MITI. The mixed is basically the Ministry of Education, and in Japan we have every 5 years, we have science and technology basic plan. And the third plan covers between 2006 to 2010, the ministry, the mixed defined innovation. Like that. So innovation generates new social and economic values with advanced scientific findings and technical innovation. And then next year, under the Abe administration, first Abe administration, do you remember the government, they launched Innovation 25. It's a long-term strategy organized, backed by the Japanese government, and Innovation 25. The government defined innovation like that. So innovation is not just confined to technological revolution, and it creates new values and brings about drastic social changes. So slightly changed. So how about social innovation? Unfortunately, there's no kind of agreed upon definition for social innovation. And Stanford University, as you know, has a Center for Social Innovation. And the center in 2003 launched a new journal Stanford Social Innovation Review. It's a quarterly magazine, very famous in this area. And the very first issue, the journal defined social innovation like that. So the process of inventing, securing support for, and implementing novel solutions to social needs and problems. It's very clear, I think. And there are a lot of jargons in this field, like the social entrepreneur and social enterprise and social innovation and how they work with each other. So this is from the Atsuko Hattori of the Rikyo University. Taking the picture is Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner Yunus. So she explained. So the Yunus, Dr. Yunus is an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur. He established the Grameen Bank. So Grameen Bank is a social enterprise. And they deal with microcredit. This is a social innovation. So they work like that. Then we should talk about the history and states. So as slide 3 explains, so the Ronald Reagan administration in 1980s. So under the administration, non-profits and governmental agencies have changed significantly. We just said that. And there's 3 the events occurs. So the first one is already I explained. So the budget was stretched out for NPO. So those NPOs have to seek for some measures to make money through some business. And second one is at the same time, the demand for NPO service has increased. And at the same time, NPOs and the government agencies look for business to run still, because usually the companies have the more efficient business skill. And later, there is a Bush administration. So under the Bush administration, the budget for the NPO were all further reduced. And more recently, if you remember in 2008, the Lehman shock, hit not only states but also all of the world. And so excessive capitalism is wrong. Some people consider excessive capitalism is wrong. So for carrying out my study, I did a series of interviews, hearings with so-called very successful social innovation organization. So this table is very too noisy and hard to see that. But I pick up 10 interviewees and try to analyze using some indicators like objectives, solution, and sustainability. And those indicators come from the social enterprise London. And today, time is limited, so I'm going to introduce only 2 successful cases. First one is Dress for Success. Some of you come from New York, so you might be familiar with the organization. So the Dress for Success receives some used clothes from women. Women tend to have a lot of clothes we do not wear anymore. And then they hand over those used clothes to economically handicapped women. The same women cannot purchase some clothes, especially business suits for a job interview. So those women get the suits from Dress for Success and go to job interview. And if they're lucky, they get the job. So this system creates jobs. Okay? And very successful. It started from tiny business in New York, but now it has expanded to 120 cities, not only in states, but also all over the world. The second one is DC Central Kitchen. It's based on DC. You might be familiar with that. So the DC Central Kitchen provide job training for homeless, especially cooking. And so those trained homeless can get the job at restaurant or other food the services. It's also very successful. They also there many the trained the people. They also cook some food and provide those food to other NPOs and also public schools. They're also very successful. So as of today, approximately 1,000 people have got job training, and also every day DC Central Kitchen cook say 10,000 meals a day. So how about Japan? So MITI, MITI organized social innovation, social business study group in 2007 and conducted survey on Japanese social innovation. And this is a result, and according to the MITI's survey, 84% said they don't know social business at all. And only 2% said they know more than 3 social business. So social business or social innovation is not recognized in Japan. And the same survey found there are 8,000 social business organizations in Japan. And market is 240 billion yen, and 32,000 people are working for social business. It's quite small compared to the States. And so why social business in Japan is so weak or so limited? And so this is from Tanimoto sensei at the Hitotsubashi University. So according to the Tanimoto sensei, so Japanese society is a government-centric system. So Japanese people, they tend to rely on the government. So Japanese tend to think the government should take care of social issues, not citizens. But I wrote at the bottom, however, the Japanese society has been changing recently. So, remember in 1990s, so we have said the bubble economy, but not only bubble economy, but bubble economy was burst down in 1990, around 1990, and then we have the natural disaster, like the big earthquake in Hanshin and 3/11, including Fukushima. So also those the instant Japanese people's mindset changed. Okay. And conventional wisdom is like at the bottom, so they graduate from prestigious university like Harvard University, and enter a big company. The photo is Otemachi area, and they climb up in a corporate ladder. That is a conventional wisdom that the people they consider the idea. Except the social innovation or social the business in Japan is limited and small, but there are few successful cases. So today I'll show you 3 successful cases. The first one is Irodori. Irodori is a happa business. Happa means leaf. So the people actually it occurred in small tiny town Kamikatsucho in Tokushima Prefecture. It has just 2,000 population, just 2,000, and half of them the aged people, aged 25 years or elder people. And they take leaves from, this is a mountain village, so they take leaves from the mountain and sell those the leaves to high expensive restaurant like Ryote. They are very successful. Important thing is half of the population in Kamikatsucho are aged people. So now they got the job. So they are very become healthier, and they enjoy their life. That is a very important point. Second case is Florence. Florence is is mentioned, the sick child care service. And in Japan, the working people with kids send their kids to nursery, and in the morning and in the evening they go to the nursery to pick kids back. But when the kids get sick, nursery rejected these sick children. So the working mother have to take care of them by themselves, and it quite very difficult for working women to continue to work. So the Florence provide care for this the sick child. This is also very successful and remarkable features of Florence is Florence has membership system. So the mothers pay the initial fee and monthly fee. So the financial basis for Florence is quite well established. And it has been quite successful. Now they have say more than 2,000 customers. Okay? And last year they took care of more than 400 kids. Sorry, 4,000 kids. The third, the example is table for two. It's a very interesting business model. So the table for two solve two problems at once. As it mentioned, today 1 billion people are suffering from malnutrition in poor area, and at the same time, another 1 billion people are suffering from over-calories in advanced countries. So, but the table for two try to do is actually doing is they have contract with company in Japan, and many Japanese big companies provide has the cafeteria 食堂社員食堂 and they offer the lunch for employees. So the contracted the companies provide healthy food to their employees. They add 20 yen on healthy food. So that 20 yen are transferred to Africa. They chose 4 African countries. So in Africa, they provide free school lunch for poor kids. So in advanced countries, they can solve the problem over calories, and in advanced developing countries, they solve the problem for malnutrition for kids. This graph comes from MITI's the study group. So the MITI defines social business, and according to MITI, social business should have 3 features. Mentioned on the left side. So the business potential and sociality should be innovative. Okay. And according to the MITI, so the yellow parts are considered social business. So I tried to apply the MITI's definition on 3 successful models, Donny Florence and Table for Two, and all of the 3, the businesses clear the 3 tests. For instance, first the business potential. So the Irodori, is very successful business model, selling leaves for ryotei, expensive the Japanese restaurant, and making a lot of money. And Florence, as I said, has a membership fee system, and quite profitable and expanding their business. And Table for Two has quite established very good business model. So they adding 20 yen on each healthy food and transfer 20 yen to Africa. And actually they take the 20% of their commission from the 20 yen. That means 4 yen for each meal go to running this business. So quite good the business model. Regarding the sociality, all of the also passed the test. I say as I said, Irodori provide good job to elderly people. So the elderly people has now the ikigai, meaningful life. It's very important for aged people. And the Florence, of course, they solve the problem for working women. And table for two, as I said, they solve two problems in advanced country and developed countries at once. And innovative, the third test is innovative. And Irodori's business is very unique, very new. Nobody before, Irodori, nobody think about, that big business. And Florence, in case of Florence, it is say in Japan, there are 600 nurseries provide sick kids care. And there are totally 20,000 nurseries around Japan. 600 is too small. And also uniqueness for Florence is, as I said, it has the membership system. And so they were established, financially well established. And so table for business is very unique. Nobody think about this kind of business model before. So findings is a kind of summary, but so in Japan, so social innovation is not fully, not recognized fully. And the social innovation activities is very limited in Japan. Okay. However, due to some reasons, like lost tickets or large natural disasters, Japanese people's value recognition has been changed. Especially the remarkable thing is, especially young people. Some young Japanese people started their own social business. So when compare Japan and the States in social business, there are of course there are some differences. I pointed out 3 points. The first one is structure. Social structure is different. So in states, the Americans consider citizens found in states. But Japan is different. So Japan consider the government rules the country. And second one is spirit is different. So the U.S. The American people has progressive spirits, but the Japanese, in general, are very conservative. There's an exception, but in general. And the third one is infrastructure, and also the instruments are different. For instance, the American states has donation system, and there are the foundations and social capital. But Japan doesn't have its lack of infrastructure and instrument. So solution. So because the societies are different, I think that in Japan there might be maybe require public support, governmental support. However, it's tricky, and if the too much governmental support is still entrepreneurship. Okay? So it should be limited. And second one is Japan, as I mentioned at the previous slide, Japan is lacking infrastructure and instrument. Okay? So the why Japanese social innovation activities need business income model. It should have income, otherwise it's quite difficult to be sustainable. And third one is the environment between Japan and States is different. So the same model cannot be, it's quite difficult to apply the same model in Japan and States. Okay? So different business models should be required. So policy implication. So Japan's social capital is lacking. So some policy encouraging social innovation might be required in Japan. So the first, the as meetings survey showed the recognition rate is very low. So the government should offer some opportunity to carry out some public relation PR opportunity. And it's quite difficult for social business to get loans. Okay? So government should offer some public loans for social business. The second one is social business is one of the reasons is quite small, so they tend to be lack of know-how, business know-how. So the government should offer some mentor program or training program. And sometimes there's some mismatch between the needs and the providers. There might be very some people want to work for social business, but they do not meet with social needs. So government should provide some opportunities to meet these customers, social business customers, and social business providers. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Konnichiwa, I hope I pronounced that properly. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really very honored to be sharing this panel with Professor Mitsumori and my colleague Greg Van Kirk. And I was really excited when I got the initial invitation to participate for a number of reasons. And one of them is I think that there are a lot of values that are important to Japanese culture, that are very important to social entrepreneurial culture, that'll hopefully get touched on a little bit in our conversation. The notion of kyokan, for example, empathy, absolutely central to social entrepreneurial efforts, effective social entrepreneurial efforts. And while there's a lot of attention paid to this notion of the individual social entrepreneur, this kind of cowboy on a white horse that gallops in and sort of saves the day, the real work of social entrepreneurship is something very different. It's not so much about these single individuals as much as it's about many different individuals with many different skill sets working together for a common good. So I think that this is a very valuable conversation to be having. What I'll try to do in the next 15, 20 minutes or so is provide a kind of 30,000-foot view of what social entrepreneurship is and what social entrepreneurial activity looks like in different markets. And then Greg is going to share his insights as a practitioner in the field, and then hopefully we'll have some time for some conversation. So just, I guess, to start, why are we here? Why is this work important? This work is important because the planet is very much in a state of crisis. 3 billion people in this world live on less than $2.50 a day. 5 billion people live on less than $10 a day. There are about 1 billion children living in poverty. 25% of the planet doesn't have access to electricity. Over 1 billion people don't have access to clean water. 2.4 billion people don't have access to adequate sanitation. 1 billion people entered 2013 on this planet unable to read. The wealthiest 20% of this planet controls 75% of its resources. The poorest 20% controls about 1.5% of the world's resources, or consumes rather. So I share this with you not to depress you, but just to really illustrate the fact that we cannot continue to operate the way that we have been operating, and that we unquestionably have to build a different kind of future, and that's where social entrepreneurship comes in. As Professor Mitsumori pointed out, it's a much more popular term these days, social entrepreneurship, but it's one that is not commonly understood. The NYU Reynolds program, for which I am the executive director, we define social entrepreneurship as pattern-breaking work of social importance done in ways that are sustainable and scalable. And I think you'll see some really good overlays with what Professor Mitsumori was talking about in terms of social business. The sustainability part is pretty self-explanatory. The effort has to have some means to continue itself, and that could be a for-profit model, or it could also be a not-for-profit model, and I'll share some examples in the United States of both in a little bit. The scalability part really has to do with impact. You don't want to concentrate a lot of resources and energy and capital to efforts that impact just a few people. Successful social entrepreneurial efforts really should impact the lives of many. And you can do that in a number of ways. You could reach scale by scaling an actual effort through a kind of franchise model, right? Ben and Jerry's is, I think, a really good example of that, and we'll look at that a little more closely in a little bit. But within the social entrepreneurial community, scaling an idea could be just as valuable. So 2 examples. One, social impact bonds, which is something that some have argued began in earnest in Japan in 2008. Here's this particular idea. You fast forward to 2013, there's a social impact bond portfolio of about 250 billion yen. These are all different institutions and entities scaling this similar idea. In the United States, you could look at the charter school movement. There are tens of thousands of different charter schools all working towards the common goal of improving educational outcomes for young people, but it's not simply one organization running all of them. So you could scale via franchise model, you can scale in idea, and both of them can be equally important in terms of impact. The pattern-breaking part is really important. The pattern-breaking part refers to the notion that social entrepreneurs tend to find these small pivot points on which very large-scale change can happen. It's an idea that was really championed by the engineer and architect and designer Buckminster Fuller, who established the trim tab principle. And the idea with the trim tab principle is if you want to move a massive system or a massive boat, you don't do that by pushing the boat, you don't do it by pulling the boat, you don't do it by banging your head against the boat. If you want to try to move this massive system, what you need to do is find the controls that move the rudder, this little trim tab. And by moving the trim tab, that's the fulcrum on which this entire system is going to shift. So what social entrepreneurs really do is they try to find the trim tab. And I'll give you 3 examples. One, an organization in the United States that's actually global that you may be familiar with is Teach for America, founded by a woman named Wendy Kopp. I'm actually an alum of that program. And the trim tab idea that she came up with was she figured out a way to get very talented young people that might go into other more lucrative fields to dedicate at least 2 years of their lives to education in underperforming schools. Fast forward to today, there are 25,000 alumni from that program serving in the highest levels of the public, private, and citizen sectors. These are lifelong advocates for educational change. 68% of TFA alums are still working directly in the field of education, and it's a $250 million organization. The idea has scaled globally. They're in 33 countries, including Teach for Japan, which is serving in 2 countries now. But again, there's somebody comes up with a simple idea, and that's the idea in which this entire change is balanced. I think another great example Professor Mitsumori touched on is Muhammad Yunus and Grameen Bank. And the trim tab idea that he stumbled upon was social lending groups are the linchpin that can make collateralist loans profitable. He figured out a way to take social capital and translate that into economic capital. So you fast forward till today, they have a loan portfolio of $78 billion, serving 95 million borrowers. They have a 95 to 98% repayment rate, which is considerably better than loan portfolios consisting of student debt or credit card debt. So again, very simple idea, scaled dramatically. My colleague Greg Van Kirk, I also think serves as a great example with the trim tab idea that he discovered was a way to unlock entrepreneurial know-how, entrepreneurial spirit in impoverished regions through the means of inventory risk management. And he'll talk in greater detail about that. At the end of the day, all of this, all social entrepreneurship is, it's a means to an end. It's a way to achieve large-scale social change. And it's one means that should be on a menu of a number of ways of going about it. An important thing to recognize about the NYU Reynolds approach to social entrepreneurship is we see it as something much bigger than business skills applied to social and environmental ends. So that's one tool in the toolkit. You can't use social entrepreneurship without that. But in actuality, what social entrepreneurship really is the opportunity to break down this false distinction that exists between the helping professions over here and the non-helping professions over there. Most professions have a role to play in sustainable and scalable social change. And social entrepreneurship as a movement really needs to tap this knowledge, tap this talent to direct it towards solving social problems. What I'd like to do now is describe different social entrepreneurial activity in 3 distinct economic markets: what we refer to as a mature market, what we refer to as a failed market, and what we refer to as the charitable marketplace, or the NPO marketplace that Professor Mitsumura was referring to. This is a gross oversimplification, but I think it's useful for discussion purposes. So in each of these 3 markets, you have a source of capital, you have an unmet need, and then you have an organization or firm trying to meet that need. And in mature markets, there's really there's a state of equilibrium between the need that's being met and the price point that people can afford to pay. And while this may suggest an absence of innovation, it really could be seen as a kind of healthy marketplace. So an example of social entrepreneurship operating in a healthy marketplace would be a business, again, like Ben & Jerry's. So Ben & Jerry's makes ice cream that makes us all fat, right? How can they be a social entrepreneurial organization? It really has to do with 2 things. One, they generate revenue, and they do use, or at least before they were purchased by Unilever, although we can talk about that in greater detail. There's a lot of positive things that have come out of that acquisition. But when this company was formed, they were formed in order to have a very positive impact on the environment. This was the issue that Ben and Jerry were most concerned with. So they created a successful business model, and they would use a large portion of their profits for environmental causes. That's great. That's not what really makes them a social entrepreneurial organization. Social entrepreneurial organizations operating in mature markets are social entrepreneurial organizations in how they go about doing business. So this principle of environmental responsibility is baked deep into the DNA of this company and exists across all the company's processes, from how they source material, to how they manufacture their product, to how they package their goods, to how they market them, to how they treat their employees. Other companies in the United States that I think fit this example, so these are for-profits, they are producing a product that exists in the market at a price point that the market can bear, right? But they're doing their business processes in a way that's very much committed to building a more just and equitable planet. Honest Tea. The Body Shop, I think there are 2 body shops actually in Japan, would be another example of this type of business. Patagonia, Burt's Bees, Tom's of Maine are all examples of businesses that have principles of corporate social responsibility baked deep into the identity and the DNA of that company, and it impacts everything that they do. Social entrepreneurship in failed markets, in contrast, is needs go unmet because a product cannot be produced, marketed, delivered at a price point that people could afford. Mosquito nets, medicine, clean water collection devices, solar lamps, clean fuel cooking stoves, etc. So the social entrepreneurs in these markets really go in and fill in the gap that exists in the marketplace so the market can function on its own more effectively. Again, I think Greg's work is a perfect example of this. But another one I'll share with you is an organization called Kickstart, which was founded by a gentleman named Martin Fisher. And Martin Fisher's theory of change was pretty simple. It was a poor person's biggest need is money. Right? The challenge that he saw was that the economic conditions in Africa, the markets that exist in certain regions in Africa, weren't producing the technologies that would help individuals become their own small-scale entrepreneurs. So the market wasn't producing these things, right? So in a subsidized fashion, Kickstart goes into Africa, and they produced a technology that the market on its own was not. In particular, it was something called the Super Soaker Moneymaker Pump. And what the Super Soaker Moneymaker Pump did was it allowed small-scale farmers to dramatically increase their yield by giving them much better access to water. So they design the product, they market the product, they finance the product, they redesign and refine the product, they service the product, all the things that a market would normally do on their own. Kickstart is coming in to do it in a kind of subsidized fashion. Fast forward to 2013, they sold 235,000 of these pumps. They've established an estimated 150,000 new businesses with an estimated 140,000 new jobs, lifting an estimated 770,000 people out of poverty. So again, comes in, addresses an issue that the marketplace isn't addressing, and kind of fills that gap so the market can address it. Social entrepreneurship in the charitable marketplace, or the nonprofit marketplace, is I think a very, very interesting topic. In the United States, it's really based on Puritan and Calvinist tenets. And in this market, you have the source of capital is either donations or government contracts trying to meet a need that the market is not meeting, and this could be in a healthy market, failed market, what have you. Something to keep in mind about the charitable marketplace in the US is that it's huge. So there are 1 million nonprofits in the United States right now, about 1,000 new ones coming online every year. In 2011, they generated about $1.6 trillion in revenue, spent about $1.5 trillion in expenses, and collectively hold about $3 trillion in assets. So this is a pretty big pie. In terms of giving in the United States, charitable giving usually levels out to be about $300 billion per year. The vast majority of that coming, about $240 billion coming from from individuals, corporations really only contributing about $5 billion of that. So this raises the question, what makes one nonprofit social entrepreneurial and another organization non-socially entrepreneurial? And from our perspective, the difference really has to do with addressing root causes as opposed to symptoms, and focusing on outcomes versus processes. So a traditional charity in the United States might be rewarded for how many people they served and at what overhead. So I run a food bank, and it's a great food bank, and I get to say, this year, 5,000 people came to my food bank, and I only spent 5% on overhead. A social entrepreneurial nonprofit will adjust that lens and ask, how many people did you lift out of poverty so they didn't have to go to the food bank in the first place? How close are you to reaching your $50 million revenue mark so you can better scale your efforts? What have you done to attract and retain the best talent? Social entrepreneurial nonprofits are much more focused on large-scale global outcome, and much less on the processes they use to get there and how much they spend on overhead. It's really, there's a great book that many of you are probably familiar with, Jim Collins, From Good to Great. Non-profits that are social entrepreneurial really set for them what he would call big, hairy, audacious goals. So you're not just focused on these little processes, but you're really trying to impact the root cause of these problems. Teach for America, I think, is an outstanding example of a nonprofit that's a social entrepreneurial organization. Nobody can reasonably argue that Wendy Cobb is not a social entrepreneur, but the entirety of their income is donations and government contracts. I think Partners in Health is another great example, a World Health Organization founded by Paul Farmer, trying to blank on his name, as another example of a great social entrepreneurial nonprofit. Charity Water would be another example. Room to Read, I think, is another example. All of these nonprofits, they're bold in their mission. They're focused on massively scaling their efforts. They focus on cross-sector alliance building. They have very sophisticated communications and lobbying strategies, and they hold as their ultimate metric of success the impact that they're having. So very briefly, I'll just kind of touch on a few of the things that the university can play in this space, some of the impact that we can have. As educators, our main responsibility within the social entrepreneurial space is to prepare more people for greater success in this field. And the Reynolds program has really gone about doing that in three particular ways. One is giving individuals permission to take on these tasks. As Professor Mitsumori pointed out, 20 years ago, an MBA student, for example, wouldn't dream of sharing with his or her friends, I want to take my MBA and I want to try to make the world a better place. It was you get your MBA and then you go out and you make a lot of money. Because of the speakers that we invite to the university, because of the workshops we have, because of the classes we offer, we're able to lay out a path and an example for other students to follow. So now, not only is it okay for an MBA or a computer engineer or a policy person or a filmmaker to say, I want to use my skill set to save the world, it's becoming more and more popular and more commonplace. And the university really has a role to play in helping people give themselves that permission. The second is a sense of community, and I think that's really important. This work is hard. There's a very high failure rate. It could also often feel lonely and difficult. So creating a sense of community that not only allows people to network with other individuals that have different sets of expertise that they're going to need, but also really to provide that kind of emotional and spiritual support to keep focused on this work is very important. And then the third is simply providing the skill sets, the networking experiences, and the knowledge bases that folks are going to need to be successful in this space, regardless of what your change-making role is going to be, either as an individual social entrepreneur or a social intrapreneur within an existing organization trying to change their behavior, or a lawyer trying to create new legal entities for social entrepreneurial activity to take place. Whatever your role is going to be, there's a certain common set of skills and knowledge bases that everyone's going to need, and the university system has an opportunity to define what those are and then communicate them to those students. So with that in mind, I hope that's provided a little bit of a 30,000-foot view, and I'll turn things over to Greg.
Good afternoon, and as Gabe and Professor Mitsumori spoke to, I'd like to just provide a little bit more of a practitioner's perspective about this. What is social entrepreneurship? What makes it tick? How do social entrepreneurs make decisions? Coming from my own experience in that of working with different colleagues around the world who are focused on different issues, be it healthcare, economic, the environment, what have you. I guess just to begin with, I think getting in, talking about the definitions are important, and I think just to add to the conversation, the way that I look at it, sort of this most simplistic way that I look at, and that our team looks at social entrepreneurship, is basically by trying to just break down the words, and I think that's where some of the confusion comes in as well. I mean, if we think about social entrepreneurship, just the two words entrepreneurship, I think everybody, by and large, is pretty clear on what an entrepreneur is, or what entrepreneurship is. What are the characteristics of entrepreneurship? It's about persistence, innovation, creativity, risk, passion, doing something new, changing systems, what have you. So I think there's a pretty clear understanding of that. I think it's when you put the word social in front of it that it gets kind of confusing. And the way that I see it is that if we look at the metrics of success, the indicators of success in business entrepreneurship, it's increased shareholder value, it's profitability. Well, when you put the word social in front of it, that simply changes to increased social impact. So all you're trying to do is take this entrepreneurial approach to increased social impact in a community that's impoverished, vulnerable, or marginalized. And that's how you measure yourself. And that's how you measure the success of the organization, as Gabe was speaking to. I think there are three very, very short key points to that. Number one is, although it's the word entrepreneurship, it doesn't have to be a business approach, exactly as Gabe was touching upon. It can be government, it can be NGOs, it can be a whole host of different kinds of organizations. The kind of organization doesn't matter. It's the approach and the indicator of success that matters. I think the second part as well is when we look at indicators of success, it's not to say that that business entrepreneurs are driven by money and profitability. I mean, I think we would probably all agree as well that the most successful entrepreneurs are simply driven by a need to create, because they're passionate about some issue and want to build something, want to innovate. It happens that the indicator of success is profitability, because that's what the capital markets demand, but I don't think Steve Jobs started Apple Computer because he wanted to make a lot of money. I think it was for different reasons. And I guess the third part to touch on is it really does get into, as Gabe was saying, it gets into the outcomes, and that those indicators of social impact are not about the activities that you do, but it's about the change that's effectuated in communities. And forgive me, but I just think about a recent conversation that I had with a good friend who contributes to my organization. And I'll describe a little bit more about what I do. But he was saying, we were talking the other day, and he was saying, well, Greg, if I gave you $100, how much would you spend on overhead? It would probably be very little. And I said, no, if you gave me $100, I would turn that into $500 of impact. And he said, no, but how much would you spend on your overhead of your organization? And he's an investment banker. And I'm saying, no, look at it from return on investment, look at it from yield, but the return on investment is the measurable social impact in communities. So I think it's a paradigm shift of looking at of how we judge change and how we judge organizations that are doing this kind of work. I think is the second part, taking a step back and looking at what we do and how it relates overall to the field. I think when Gabe was going through some of those statistics, obviously it can be depressing, and it can be dismotivating, unmotivating. It can be paralyzing. And I think that one of the keys when you look at this work and you look at effective social entrepreneurship is the understanding that poverty is a symptom and not a problem. And what is it a symptom of? Well, it's basically a symptom of a lack of access to something. Unfortunately, a lack of access normally to a whole mix of different things. As Gabe talked about with Teach for America, it's a lack of access to a decent education. It's a lack of access to economic opportunity, a lack of access to healthcare, a lack of access to the rule of law. But by and large, poverty is caused by a lack of access to something. And so looking at the symptom makes it intimidating. I think in social entrepreneurship or in any type of change making, just as in business entrepreneurship, you're trying to find the root cause of what the problem really is. And you've got to dig deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's where you find that trim tab. That's where you find that thing that you can change a little bit of that will change the entire system. So in my work, what we're looking at is a lack of access in developing world countries, primarily Latin America, to things like cook stoves, things like electricity, vision care, pure water. And so if you think about how does that lack of access contribute to poverty? Well, a family that's cooking on the floor is going to spend about 70% or 80% more on wood or on charcoal than they would if they simply had an efficient stove with a chimney. Think about a family that doesn't have electricity. Right? Children can't read, people can't work at night. You lose 12 hours of the day where you basically can't do anything. Clean water. If you don't have access to clean water, children get sick. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to doctors at hospitals that said the number one problem is children with diarrhea, but the problem is they come in, we solve the problem, we know they're going exactly back to the place where the problem was caused. So think of the profound impact of those problems, and by simply getting people basic technologies that already exist, we can solve those problems and help people bust out of the cycle of poverty. Our way of going about doing that was looking at not even that as the root problem, but the root, because the technologies do exist, but the problem was simply one whereby local entrepreneurs didn't feel empowered to go out and sell these types of technologies in a sustainable way. So we came up with a mechanism that we call the micro-consignment model, whereby we identify, train, equip, and support local women entrepreneurs so that they can go out to communities and sell these things and identify new problems, diagnosing them and coming up with new solutions. Not by having to buy things up front because they can't afford to do so. Not by using a loan or a credit mechanism, because nobody's ever run these businesses before. And think about, would you start a business if you didn't know how to run the business and you couldn't project demand with 100% debt? Right? It's extremely intimidating, probably not the wisest decision. But by using this consignment mechanism, whereby after we've trained people, we consign them all of the products that they need. They go out and sell them, and after they've sold them, they take a part of their profit, give the rest back to our organization, and we reinvest it in more products and more training for new people. So we're trying to get at this root, this symptom of poverty by looking deeper and deeper at the causes, and what we found that it was basically this risk-shifting element that was problematic that we could solve. But within this whole process and our work, I think it's much more interesting and probably and more relevant today to talk in more general terms. What is it that we've learned? Well, I think as with anything I've learned in our organization has learned some of these sort of best practices and keys to success more by falling on our face than through our successes. But you certainly see patterns, I think, in ineffective social entrepreneurship. When you look at Mohammed Yunus, when you look at Wendy Kopp, when you look at other people that I greatly admire who do this kind of work. And I would just want to touch on a few things, and ideally that's the context for a conversation. I think, just as we talked about, social entrepreneurs are focused on mission, are focused on desired outcomes, focused on changes in communities, not changes for shareholders. Doesn't have to be mutually exclusive thing, but that's the primary focus on social impact. I think also that there has to be a set of core values that social entrepreneurs follow. I was at a meeting with some folks from IBM a while back, and I recall that they talked about how they had recently come up with, I think it was 3 guiding principles or 3 core values for across the entire company. And they were talking about how incredibly that was helpful in decision-making processes, in meetings, when people were trying to decide strategy and tactics. Because previous to that, if we're talking to each other and we disagree, it can be confrontational. No, I think this. No, you think that. But when you have 3 guiding principles, when you have other things that you can look at that are outside of the conversation, then you can point at that and say, well, if we do this, is that adhering to this in the most optimal way? So you can point to somewhere else that helps you stay on track. So if you look at social entrepreneurship, as has been discussed, those guiding principles are social impact, inclusiveness, do no harm, dignity, empowerment. Not because they're romantic notions, but simply because those are the things that are going to create what we're hoping to do, which is sustainable change. And it's not just about sustainable change. It's not just about sustainability for our organizations, which is oftentimes what we think. But the most important thing is the sustainability of the change. Speaking to solar solutions, if you look years ago when low-cost solar lamps first got out into Africa and people were distributing them, what happened is people would get all of these lamps, but there was no way to fix them when they broke. Right? Well, that's not sustainable change. And not only that, it doesn't hear the do no harm, not simply on a micro level, because that family now has bought something that they can't use, but on a macro level, because then you had market spoilage and everybody thought solar lamps didn't work anymore. Right? So you had to go in and make an extra effort for the next people who came in. So I think it's about understanding the core values and sticking to those core values. The second part is, I think it's an understanding that although we'd like for things to be revolutionary, more often than not they're evolutionary. Even if you look at, if you were to say that the effect of Facebook and in the Arab Spring, the effect of technology in the Arab Spring, that was a revolution, but now what do we find later? Well, really, this is going to be evolutionary. This is going to take time. I think oftentimes when we think about entrepreneurship and we compare it to social entrepreneurship or change-making in communities, we get our metrics a bit skewed. I mean, if you can look at, what recently, just a few days ago, WhatsApp, the app, which was, started just a few years ago, has 50 employees and was bought by Facebook for $13 billion. Right? We want this, we're used to this quick, especially with technology and apps and everything, that things move quickly, success happens quickly. That's not how this happens. It's called development work because you have to nurture it and you have to learn over time. I would say a third thing is, it's an understanding that we have to look at the entire capital mix. When we say the word poverty, what's the first thing that everybody thinks of? Money, right? Communities lack money. I think that's oftentimes unproductive and can lead to paternalistic strategies. What I mean by that is that the communities that we work with, for example, in rural Guatemala or in Haiti, yes, they lack economic capital, they lack financial capital, they're poor in that way. But there's so many other forms of capital that need to be looked at that I think social entrepreneurs either intuitively or intentionally look at when trying to understand problems and come up with solutions. Physical capital, human capital, organizational capital, who's already there working, cultural capital, and most importantly, I think as everyone has touched upon, is social capital. Is how do people work together? Where does trust come from? And normally, just as in the example with the Grameen Bank, microcredit, Mohammed Yunus, normally that's truly the basis of creating change, is working within communities and understanding where the social capital exists and leveraging that to create some type of long-term change. I would say as well, really when you look at what we're trying to do, it's trying to intervene somewhere in the cycle of poverty. And the cycle of poverty is a situation that is self-perpetuating. There's the phrase, it's very expensive to be poor, which is true. Right? Everything costs more. If you look at in the United States, in poor communities right around you, where do you have to shop? You have to shop at convenience stores. That's expensive, right? The urban deserts. If you look at being able to access a loan, payday loans. Loan sharks pay 25%. Once you've entered the cycle of poverty and you have limited means, limited forms of capital, everything else becomes more expensive and it's hard to get out. And so simply what we're trying to do is intervene. And the real challenge, and I think where social entrepreneurs or any organization that's effectuating change makes a difference, is by shifting uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, I don't know how I'm going to survive tomorrow, to risk. If I think about the business entrepreneurs that I work with, and I first started working 12 years ago in Guatemala, I used to say to them, well, why don't you invest in this? And if you invest in this, and in a few weeks or in a year, you're going to have success. Because I come from the United States, and it's bootstrapping, it's a meritocracy, and you can invest in the future and see the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, I got continuous resistance. Why is that? Well, it's because people didn't have money to invest. Weren't used to things being successful based upon their efforts. They could not only see the light at the end of the tunnel, they didn't see a tunnel. So it's incredibly uncertain. And when we live in uncertainty, it's paralyzing. And I think the two questions that, there's a great book that frames this called The Influencer, but the two questions that need to be answered for someone to take a risk, which is what you need to escape the cycle of poverty, is can I do it and is it worth it? If you think of every decision we make in our day, you're thinking that in the back of your head. Can I do it? Is it worth it? And oftentimes when you ask someone in an uncertain environment, to try to do something new. Can I do it? No. Is it worth it? I don't think so. I don't see a positive outcome coming from it. And so social entrepreneurials try to at least get that person or that community to a place where they say maybe and maybe, and they're willing to take that chance. I think I would just, one last piece, and then I'd just like to close on a comment that I thought about as we were talking here. The real key in all of this, and talking about what role the university has to play, or business has to play, or nonprofit organizations, or whomever, this is all only sustainable and only works if we create these mutually symbiotic ecosystems. If you think about we talk about Africa, and you look, well, what's the history of Africa from the West? You have this history of colonialism. Well, it's a parasitic relationship, right? That doesn't work. Or then we tried, development practices were paternalistic, right? One part benefits, the other part doesn't. Again, that doesn't work. The only way that these systems changes happen is if you create these relationships whereby everybody adds and derives value. Everyone has to give something, and everyone has to get something. When I think about that, forgive me, but I have a 4.5-year-old son, and which means I've seen the movie Finding Nemo. That's popular in Japan, but I've seen it many, many times. And when I think about mutually symbiotic ecosystems, in Finding Nemo, it's Nemo and Marlin, and they live in the anemone. And that's a mutually symbiotic ecosystem. The anemone has this shocking power, so it protects the fish, and then the fish, when they defecate, provide nutrients to the anemone. They both do something for each other, and they both take something away from each other. And that's how true systems work, and that's how true systems can sustain themselves. Just like any business relationship or relationship that any of us had, if you keep giving and giving and you're not getting anything, it's going to end, or vice versa. And so I guess the last thing is, I think what's wonderful about these types of efforts, and I congratulate you on bringing one together here, is that although culturally we might be different, and I actually, which I didn't say, I had the good fortune of living in Japan for about 3 years. So I lived in Kokura for 3 years, from 1991 to 1994. But I forget all of my Japanese. I just heard somebody say, "Chotto matte kudasai," and I was like, aha, I know that. But I think, especially as Gabe was speaking to, is, we're living in this world of unfortunately, of scarcer resources. And, from limitation comes the need for innovation. And if you don't have limitations, you don't need innovation, right? And I think what's wonderful is you see all of these opportunities for sharing best practices and learning from each other, which is what this is about. I mean, if you look at, for example, the table for two, right? It's basically a cross-subsidy model, where one wealthier stakeholder is subsidizing food for another. Well, where else does that happen? There's a very famous model in India called the Aravind Eye Hospital, where that works with cataract surgery, where you have one hospital, the surgical rooms are the exact same, and people walk in either the social door or the private door. And if you walk in the private door, you get a nice couch and a nice TV. If you walk in the social door, you get a bench, but the surgery is exactly the same for everyone. These people pay more, these people pay less, and when you average it out, it all becomes sustainable. Again, a cross-subsidy model, just like Table for Two. Here in the United States, a very popular thing now is a buy one, give one model. Right? You buy a pair of glasses, you buy a pair of shoes, and then they'll give a free pair of shoes to someone else. Point being is culturally very different, but they're all cross-subsidy models in their own way. And to the extent that we can learn and share with each other about these, then that's where the great opportunity comes from, and that's where further innovation comes. bringing all of our different forms of capital together at the same time. So I'll close there, but thank you very much.
So we have a couple of minutes. So we're done with the Q&A session. Today, actually, the one person working for the Table for Two is in this room, so I think it's quite relevant. So can the person give a short comment? Please use microphone.
Thank you very much for the great speech. I'm part of the Table for the DC chapter, and it was great to hear the different perspective about social innovation. And I actually have a question about our activities and how it's applicable to US culture. So Dr. Ms. Mori mentioned that because of the cultural differences in social structures, it's sometimes difficult to apply NPO or some social innovation to different cultures. That's something what we are encountering in the US. Table for Two has been really successful in Japan, and they have been expanding to different countries, including US. But I think the main reason Table for Two has been successful in Japan is that there are a lot of corporate cafeterias and university cafeterias participating in the program. Compared to that, here in US, you don't really find that corporate cafeterias and university college cafeterias. The payment system are different and management system are different. So we've been not successful approaching that kind of venue, but approaching to restaurants that's kind of successful. However, what Mr. Brocker mentioned, there are so many NPOs already existing in this country. So when we approach to restaurants, they already have something, some partnership with others. So my question is that when you apply to existing social innovations to different cultures, what things you should pay attention, and what is key to succeed in different cultures, especially like somewhere there are many NPOs already exist.
Thank you. I think that's a great question, and certainly touches on the fact that there's a challenge there because social entrepreneurial efforts are often, by definition, they're global. You're trying to realize a global impact. I think some of the principles that Greg touched on are things that a social entrepreneur working across cultures would be wise to keep in mind in a variety of cultural environments. Things that seem and sound simple, but are really critical to engaging people, to one's ability to effectively share a vision to get people on board. Treating people with dignity, giving people the opportunity to play a leadership role in whatever the efforts are, can be very valuable. Greg touched upon the buy one and give one model, which is very popular with Tom Shoes, which many folks have probably heard of, or Warby Parker, an eyeglass company. And I think social entrepreneurs have to be very careful in terms of how they respect the local cultures that they're participating in, and the buy one, give one model is a really great example. I have a huge problem with Tom Shoes, right? Because and it's very different from Warby Parker's buy one, give one model. And the difference is the Tom Shoes model is this paternalistic, I'm coming in and I'm gonna give you a pair of shoes and then I'm gonna leave. And so what winds up happening is whatever shoe economy might exist in the local region is squashed, right? People can be dependent on these shoes, and if new shoes don't come in, that's the end of it, right? So it's a very paternalistic, I'm coming in to help you, here I'm giving you this thing. Warby Parker is a very different buy one, give one model. It's yes, you buy a pair of glasses, I'm gonna give a pair of glasses, but I'm gonna give a pair of glasses to an organization called Vision Spring. And Vision Spring is working to help local entrepreneurs be eyeglass dealers by providing them with a less expensive inventory. So I think the efforts, just in terms of respect for local cultures, dignity, really can translate very powerfully in how the social change effort is enacted.
If I could just add, I think it is I concur with obviously everything that Gabe has to say, and I think you're touching upon probably one of the hardest things. Is that you need to evolve and change over time your own organization, and this is something that I struggle with, that we struggle with continually. And so I think the most important thing is just asking yourself the question as an organization. I say, a few things. I think that, talk about core values and not strategies and tactics. You have to be willing to totally throw away the way you did something in the past. And so the first place you start to be able to decide that, I believe, is the simple question of what do I care about the most? What matters to you the most? If what matters the most is your strategy or your tactic, the way that you do things, then maybe it's less likely that you're going to be able to adapt and change. If what matters to you the most is getting people in Africa nutrition that they didn't have before, and empowering people here to make a difference in that effort, if those are the two things that matter, then it opens up your mind. You can change it in all different ways. Yeah? And then the question is really, well, then as a table of two, what do we do that really makes a difference? It's creating the engaged person here with someone there, and then you can start to think in new and creative ways to do it. And maybe it's just 4-2 is really what you're about, and it's not about the table. It's about the table in Japan, but maybe it's some other 4-2 here. I don't know, but I think that those are the questions that if you find out what is it, not your, what do you care about the most, and not the strategy or tactic get hung up on trying to put a square peg in a round hole, as we would say, but what is it that really makes you tick? What is it that makes it different? And what is it about your approach that can be translated across different cultures? And that's a real exploration, and that just plain takes time, and there's no way to avoid that. And the only way you figure it out, I think, is by having these problems. So.
Can I take one or two questions? It's okay. Do you have time? Okay, so we'll take one or two questions. So please ask a question.
Ayuki Mamura of Washington Innovation Network. About 4 years ago, I started a group called, not group, the platform called Washington Innovation Network, WIN for short, by bringing Japanese and American, whoever the profession they are, not necessarily technology guys, but the university faculties, journalists, businessmen, so on and so forth, to discuss what kind of the collaboration could be possible between two countries to look at the possible innovations in various areas. But the world of innovation itself is so sexy, so everybody wants to use that. So I do not know now what the innovation really means, but leaving that aside, I have a kind of comments and a question. What is cultural difference? If we emphasize the difference of the cultural background, you'll never have anything done. I was with the United Nations Development Program, assigned to Malaysia, Nigeria, Somalia, and the Caribbean. So many different cultural backgrounds. All those experts from 70 or 80 countries. If you emphasize the cultural difference, nothing could be done. So as you said, there is some core values. That is something which we really have to dig in and put them together and to learn from that. That's the cultural things. The second one is sustainability and scalability. Sustainability is very important. In that sense, I rather want to say more business orientation of social entrepreneurship. In other words, you really have to have business plan, model. You cannot sustain if you lose money. You have to make profit, but that profit will not go to shareholders. That goes to the next projects or raise your staff members' salaries. And scalability, those social entrepreneurs will start maybe locally, in small size, but potential that should have scalability to expand into beyond borders. And then third one is in Japan, 8,000 NPOs, I don't know whether that's a big, many or small, but many of the Japanese NGOs are very small, tiny, struggling financially, because each of them has their own value. They started their own, organization, but many of them don't want to merge because they want to keep their own beliefs. But it is not good in the sense of economy of scale. So I like my question here. Only question today is that to Professor Mitsumori, where does that kind of compatibility of the core and money would affect the expansion or development of Japanese social entrepreneurs or social innovations? Do you think there should be more mergers of the small, tiny NGOs to develop more scalable economies so that they can have better compensation schemes for their own staff, and maybe bring the more innovative projects? That's my question to you. Thank you very much.
Regarding the scale and the size of the NGO or NPO, you are right, I think. I mentioned the Metis survey. So according to the Metis survey, the most of the NGO or NPO has employees less than four people or less. So as you mentioned, the most of the NPO or NGO are very small. But I think the size itself in this program, as you said, the sustainability is very important. So if just the size is cannot be sustainable, it just fails. So if the NPO or NGO are very successful, I think it will expand. And actually, I show some 3 examples, and there is no first one and second one. The first one, second one has successfully expanded. So if the business model is very good and very successful, I think the size will expand. Do you understand?
I have some doubt about that.
One thing I'd like to add is I think you make a very good point that the successful social entrepreneurial organizations that are driven by a for-profit model, and I keep referring to Ben & Jerry's in Patagonia, Kind Bar is another one that I didn't mention before. You are 100% correct that what is required there is an absolutely sound, profitable business model. And those social entrepreneurs recognize that the product they're producing, right, has to stand on its own merit as the best product in that class, or the business goes away. So I think the successful social entrepreneurs that adopt that kind of for-profit model, some of the examples that I cited in the mature marketplace, recognize the fact that nobody's going to be buying the thing because there's a social good that's associated with it. It needs to be a great product with adequate capital and appropriate marketing and all of that. And as a university, we have a responsibility to teach social entrepreneurs those skills. So we have a social venture business plan competition. This is how you write a business plan. Right? This is how you read a profit and loss statement. Here are at least the basic things you need to know to effectively hire an accountant. Here's how you meet accountants that might want to work for social entrepreneurial organizations. So I think that's such an important part. The sound business principles have to be employed for those people for whom the social change is resting on a successful for-profit business. Right? In regards to this notion of so many nonprofits, right, and they're competing for these very limited resources, it really is a problem. And I really appreciate your point about if there could be mergers and then perhaps greater salaries for employees. It's a huge problem. You want to attract great talent, you need to be able to compete with the private sector. Something very interesting happened in New York to try to fix that problem. So I worked for a while for the Administration for Children's Services. It's the foster care, child care city agency, $2.1 billion a year budget, with contracts scattered over hundreds of different foster care providers and preventive service providers. And New York City did something I think that was very innovative and smart. And they said, we are no longer going to award this many contracts. We still have a $2.1 billion budget, but instead of giving it out over this many contracts, we're giving it out over this many contracts. And all you organizations out there that have been getting contracts from us from the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you now have to merge in effective ways if you want to get money from the city. So the trim tab there was, we're going to change behavior in a diffuse and inefficient marketplace by awarding dollars to those organizations that most successfully merged. And that was just one way of going about it, an example of one particular, system. It didn't necessarily result in greater salaries, right? There is one notable exception. If anybody's interested in looking this up on the internet, there's a great foster care agency in New York called Good Shepherd Services, run by a woman named Sister Paulette LaMonaco. And one of the reasons they're so successful, I think, is because they pay some of the highest entry-level wages for people just coming out of social work school. But that's at least one example of the role policy can play in changing behavior in the nonprofit marketplace. One small example.
Just add one piece that I think that I think a note of caution about all of it too is, and this is now me wearing my my organizational hat, is it's really hard. It's extremely hard because if you look at it conversely, you're asking a social business or in this context, you're asking an organization to do something that is good for the community and make money. But we don't ask businesses to do that. So you're asking an organization to do two things, right, that sometimes can be hard to do at the same time. It reminds me of, I remember reading about the space shuttle, and why the space shuttle program failed. And it was because basically the simple analysis was if you wanted to put satellites into space, you would do what the Russians do and what the Europeans do and what the United States used to do, or I think what the Japanese do, right? Is you would simply have a rocket, a staged rocket, and you would put the satellite on top and you would shoot it up. That's the most efficient way to do that. If you wanted to put man in space, you might have, like now we have, like, you know, with the X rocket or whatever it is, you would have something where man could go in space and do scientific research. The issue with the space shuttle is you try to do both. Yeah. If you wanted to launch satellites, you would never have human beings in a ship going along with it. And if you wanted to have man in space, you would never have a cargo bay where you had to fit 50 tons of satellite cargo. So because you tried to do both at the same time, they both failed. And I think that's sort of the, you know, the word of caution, and that's where it gets very, very difficult. And that's where the struggle is. And I think that, you know, ideally what you see, and as Gabe's been speaking to, and everyone is to your point exactly, is within the social world, there are more business practices, more efficiencies that come in. But conversely, within the business world, there are more social factors that come in. I think that's where success really comes from, that it happens on both sides and they both get it in their DNA, what the other one already has.
So time is up, so we are closing. So thank you very much for coming to attend this session. So I think we have a very productive discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.